community meeting. It's October 25th, 2021, and I'm glad everyone was able to come out on this cold and rainy night, and hopefully we won't disappoint you. We're going to start with Tom Skorowski. He's the Executive Director of Community Development and Planning, and then we've also got Nick Erickson here from the Department of Public Works. He's the Commissioner. So he'll make a presentation as well and answer any questions. So also, if you have questions you don't want to answer, you don't want to ask during the meeting, you can ask them after the meeting. I think they'll stay for a little while after. So we'll get started right away. I know your time is valuable, and Tom's going to take it away. Go ahead,
Great.
Tom.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out this evening, and thanks for anyone who's watching on FATV. My name is Tom Skorowski. I'm the Director of Community Development and Planning for the City of Fitchburg. I want to start things off just by kind of walking you through what our department does so you have a good idea of the different things that fall under our purview. And then I'm going to go pretty quickly through some different things happening in my department today, and some that have direct impacts on Ward 1, some that might be more citywide in their impacts. And please, at any time as we're talking, it's meant to be informal. If you want to raise your hand, you have a question, or even frankly just want to shout one out, I'm here for you all at the end of the day, and I want to make sure I'm answering any questions, concerns that you might have, things that fall within my department. So that's just a quick overview of the department. There are 3 divisions. Our planning division really is responsible for coordinating larger land development in the city. We have a staff liaison to our planning board, which is generally the body that permits larger development projects, and our conservation commission for any work that occurs within the wetlands. Our economic development division serves as a business liaison in the permitting process and works to really strengthen and expand the commercial sector in the city. And then finally, our housing and development division, we're really focused on administering 2 key federal funds, the CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant Program, which funds a variety of different programs throughout the city. The YMCA, as an example, the main Boulder project, both in front of us and behind us here, is funded in part through CDBG. Certainly projects within the DPW, and really wide-ranging parks, playground, walkability improvements throughout the city. And then our home funding funds, just as it sounds, home projects throughout the city, whether rental or home ownership, largely rental and affordable development projects. But the office also goes beyond those 2 funds. It really is seeking grant writing for different projects throughout the city, such as the First and Railroad Park in Ward 1 and the Twin City Rail Trail, which is working its way along Ward 1 as well. We're both secured for lengthy grant writing and supporting efforts through my department. So just to go kind of in brief through a few key things we're working on and their impacts on the ward. We just wrapped up a 17-month zoning effort. It was finalized in April of 2021. And it was really a collaborative effort between the City Council, certainly Councilor Schultz here, our planning board, and we had a 25-member advisory committee. And basically, this zoning reform effort made major changes to what is and isn't acceptable in terms of land use in the city. And these changes really came out of our 2017 Economic Development Strategic Plan. I just picked out a few of the changes. It's a 180-page document, so I'm not going to walk you through the whole thing. I want everyone to stay awake this evening. But I did pick a few things that I thought might be of interest to the folks in Ward 1, but also just generally. So one of the things we did in the RC district, which the whole city is split up into different districts. Ward 1 is split between the RC and the RB district. And the RC district is our densest residential neighborhoods in the city, basically. And so what we did is reduce the lot sizes and the frontage requirements to make it easier to develop, particularly single-family housing, but also other housing types in the neighborhood. These changes will allow for single-family housing on 5,000 square feet as opposed to 10,000, which was the norm previous, and any other residential uses with a 7,500 minimum lot size. And I'll show you why that's important. And really thinking about the Patch neighborhood was one of the neighborhoods that helped us make this change, because our zoning said that you couldn't build anything if you didn't have 10,000 square feet as a minimum lot size. But if you look at neighborhoods like the Patch and many in Ward 1, they were built a time long before automobiles, when much smaller lot sizes were the norm. So what I highlighted here in red is about 10,000 square feet. And as you can see in this area, the Patch right on Railroad Street, that's 4 houses within that one area that today you wouldn't even be able to build one house in. So we knew we needed to do something to encourage more housing development in neighborhoods that were smaller in scale. The neighborhoods around the downtown look very different than a lot of the neighborhoods in the north and the south of the city. So we wanted our zoning to reflect that. Another change we made, we revamped our infill development, which allows for single-family development on a 5,000 square foot lot. In the RB district, which is a little bit less dense than the RC, you can still develop on a smaller lot, but you just need a special permit from the planning board. But in both cases, we wanted to make it easier to build housing on smaller lots. Our accessory dwelling units, what some folks might recognize as in-law apartments, we made changes to allow those to be by right in some neighborhoods where basically you don't need to ask for special permission. In the RB neighborhood, it's allowed by special permit. And in our old zoning, we had a 5-year recertification requirement. Sounds really boring, but the short of it is, if you wanted to get an in-law apartment, you had to get a special permit, pay probably $50,000, $60,000 to build out the in-law apartment, and then every 5 years you would have to go back to the board and ask, could we please keep this? Could we please keep this? There's a large cost associated with it, and it made it harder to develop things like in-law apartments. So we wanted to make that easier, so we removed that requirement. We also created more design guidelines and standards for larger multifamily developments. We reduced parking requirements for smaller units, so we felt like a 1-bedroom shouldn't have the same standard as a 3-bedroom development. So we adjusted the parking requirements accordingly. A few other things we did. We made it easier to do things like breweries, distilleries, and bakeries, places where people were manufacturing food. In our current zoning, it looked more like manufacturing than like a brewery or a bakery, which of course should be allowed in the right commercial districts. We wanted to look at the same thing with artisan manufacturing. So right down the street here at the former Sentinel and Enterprise building, you have Teacher Lock, which is a great manufacturing company. They operate on about 2,000 square feet. And they produce locks for use in school buildings throughout the nation. And manufacturing in a place like that looks quite different than the GE factory when it was in full operation, when it was employing hundreds of people and taking up a 14-acre facility. So we wanted to create a special piece of our zoning that made it easier for small-scale manufacturing to thrive in the city, because we still build stuff in the city. It's just often at a much smaller scale, and we want to encourage that. By the same token, we have a lot of old mill buildings, a lot of old brownfield sites, which are old polluted sites that are former sites of industry. And we also wanted to make it easier for properties that fit that category to get the flexibility they need to really adapt to today's economy. So we created a new district called the Adaptive Industrial District, which, to simplify it, says any properties that fall into that category, they can go to a special permit hearing from the planning board and ask for flexibility to do things that maybe we hadn't quite considered in our zoning ordinance, but might be appropriate for the site. And then finally, we made some major map changes. We created a downtown business district. Before, we had 8 different central business districts in the city, and what I would often say is if you have 8 central business districts, and they're scattered throughout. None of them are actually central. So we created one that was central called the Downtown Business District, and really created a whole set of guidelines for what our downtown should look like. And then with the other areas, such as the Water Street Corridor, which isn't downtown, it's more of a neighborhood business district, we created different commercial districts to suit the neighborhood around it. So particularly for the Water Street Corridor, we wanted to create a commercial district that made sure that any development that was happening was respectful of the neighborhood around it. Because it's much different than perhaps in a downtown where you might want to see a larger, denser development, because it might be more appropriate here, but perhaps not down the street. So all of the map changes, and I would recommend anyone who hasn't seen them, you can check it out on accessgis.com/Fitchburg-MA. I think there's a typo there. There shouldn't be that I after the S, but that can really help you see the full scope of the map changes that we made and where your property fits within the district. And if anyone ever wants me to kind of walk you through it, I'd be happy to do that either after the meeting or some other day. So that's zoning in a nutshell, 17 months and 180 pages of work. I know it's a lot to take in, but I don't know if anyone has any questions on that before we kind of move on to projects in the city. I'll take that to mean I explained everything perfectly. I don't understand it all. Up next, some major development projects. I just want to talk about a few of the things that have come through my office, and many of which you've likely heard of. So starting with cannabis. So we've had a pretty large influx of cannabis facilities in the city over the last 3 to 4 years. So we currently have 7 facilities in operation, 3 retail and 5 cultivation, and 12 additional are in the state permitting process. 5 of those are retail facilities, 6 are cultivation, and 1 is a testing facility. Of the ones, that are still in the permitting process, I believe there's 1 which is right across from the Market Basket Plaza. That is a cannabis retail facility that is slated to open in 2022. But with those 12 that are still in the process, the caveat there is that the state's process is very complicated. Some of them might work their way through the process, some of them might not, depending on their level of sophistication, because it's a very complicated process, and the state kind of did that deliberately so to make sure that any developments that were happening were really respecting the neighborhoods around them and happening in the right way.
The retail, they're capped at 8 in the city currently, Tom?
Yes, so we've got 3 open existing. There's 1 on Lunenburg Street, 1 on Airport Road, and 1 on Authority Drive. And then 5 additional that are permitted but haven't been approved by the state yet. So there's 1 on Water Street, there's 1 on John Fitch Highway, there's another on, it shouldn't ask me questions like that at 6:45. Exactly, so that one will be hopefully open up this year, and we just got an update at our recent planning board meeting that they've started to pull permits and develop that project. We're always unsure of what the holdup is, if it's the build out or the state, but it seems like they're moving through at the state, and now they're just starting their build out. Yes? Does the city get the 2.0 million, or do you have to pay that to the state? Oh, great question. So that is actually just speaking of the property taxes. In the cultivation alone, we've seen $2.98 million since 2016, and most of it actually, that includes some of the medical. Most of it's really occurred since 2018. And then in addition to that, what I don't have this accounted for here is there's host community agreements, and then the retail sales, we get an additional 3% tax. But no, none of that's reflected here. That was just speaking of the property tax impact. But it's a significant tax boon that we've seen in the last few years, and I know folks kind of feel wary of this new economy, but it is a new economy, and we wanted to take this as an opportunity, especially with some of our older mill buildings, which a lot of the cultivation facilities were in abandoned mill buildings, and they brought these properties up to code. Revolutionary Clinics, one of our 5 cultivators in operation today, was actually listed by Inc. magazine as one of the top 5 fastest growing companies in the country. So, you know, it's a new industry, and we wanted to get out in front of it and make sure we're supporting, you know, some of the real leaders in the industry here. And I think it's bring a great tax benefit to the city. Yes?
The city is capped at 8 retail?
That's correct.
What is the cap for cultivation?
There is no cap. But at the same time, you know, I think we've gotten quite a few in the pipeline, and I think we've reached a point where I guess, number one, there aren't as many large mill buildings that might be appropriate for a conversion. But number two, we've also had some conversations with folks that have come to us with cannabis cultivation concepts, and we said, hey, you know, we've got 11 in the pipeline. We also have to diversify our economy, right? There was once upon a time where Fitchburg had so much of our manufacturing economy was in paper, and when all the paper mills closed, that wasn't great. We don't want to be in that same situation 10 years from now, and so we have started to work, and I'll show you one key project where we told a developer we didn't feel like this was appropriate, and we got something instead that I think will help us diversify.
So where there's no cap, there could be a possibility that the old Wilshire Dam Prep could be a cultivating spot?
Great question, and the answer there is no. So with cultivation facilities, you've got to be in an industrial district, but the Notre Dame Prep is not. But actually, since it's not on the PowerPoint, but I guess I'll veer from script here. We have a new property owner that came in right after they purchased the Notre Dame building. They actually walked over from the Registry of Deeds to the city to talk with us about what their initial plans are as to develop housing there.
I asked because a police sign went up on the front lawn the other day.
Oh, really? Well, I wouldn't be concerned about cannabis going in there. That's not an allowable use. You're welcome. Another major development project, Game on Fitchburg, you know, certainly on the other side of town, not in Ward 1, but it's going to be hugely impactful for the city at large. Just a few of the things we'll be looking at. There's 7 full-sized outdoor fields, and all of those are in operation today. But what really is coming up next is the 100,000 square foot indoor facility, which will bring futsal, which is basically soccer on a basketball court, volleyball courts, basketball courts, axe throwing, and bar and a restaurant as well. So you can eat there, you can have a drink, you can throw axes, preferably not after you had a drink. But the goal there for the indoor facility would be to open in late 2021. And, you know, this is going to create some real opportunities for commercial recreation in the city, kind of tying in with Great Wolf, but also a huge tax benefit and just a great recreation and tourism opportunity for the region. And the last kind of major project I want to talk about was Amazon. And this is actually one where we did have a developer come say they wanted to break up this the old facility, the Simon Saw building, into 10 different cannabis cultivation facilities. And this was where, you know, the mayor's office, in, you know, partnership with my office and a few others, just kind of pumped the brakes a bit and said, we've got enough cannabis right now. Can we think of other things we can bring into the city to diversify a bit? And so that same developer came back with this concept for an Amazon last mile facility. So they actually are in the process of demolishing the old building, which is a shame, but it's also to some degree past its useful shelf life. And they're going to be constructing a 97,000 square foot facility, which will also include a mezzanine, which will more or less double the square footage. And the goal will be to create 50 to 100 on-site jobs and 150 to 200 off-site drivers, and even more during peak delivery season, like the holidays and so forth. So we see this as a great opportunity to bring additional jobs to the city. Any of the Amazon employees make a minimum of $15 an hour plus benefits. But then in addition to that, the city really stands to benefit not just from a property tax increase, but from the excise tax. So all of the vans that are parked at the Amazon facility, which will be well over 100, will actually be taxed in addition to that as personal property, and the city will reap those benefits as well. So whether from a jobs or a taxes standpoint, we're pretty excited about what that facility will bring. Any questions on either of those three? Yes. At the Amazon facility? The Amazon facilities. Yeah. They don't have 150 to 200 full-time drivers. Right. So it's a great question. So one of the things that we've been working on, I guess first and foremost with the Amazon developer and in partnership with our DPW, and Nick can probably speak more to it because he's kind of leading the charge here, but we're working with the developer to pave the road over to begin with and hopefully add on sidewalks, which is a discussion we started way back when, before they even got permitted, and we were pretty straightforward about that being something we wanted to see. But in terms of the traffic concern, because as we all know, once you pave a road over, people are only going to drive on it faster. We also wanted to have a traffic study done, which we did at the outset of the project. And then a year from operations being underway, we're going to have another traffic study, and we'll be sort of monitoring where we are a year from then, from the baseline pre-operation, and we'll be asking of the developer to make any other changes that might be needed to improve traffic circulation. One of the good things is they're staggering when the delivery drivers leave, so they're not all going to leave at peak rush hour in the morning or the evenings, and they'll really stagger throughout the day a lot of their travel. Nick, do you have more to add than that? Indeed. And so that's something we'll be closely monitoring over the next year.
Yeah, the traffic study review after the 1 year mark, I think, is going to be key, and I think we're going to see some changes that are necessitated as a result of that. Just paving Intervale and Poplar alone is going to improve the situation for the residents because it's a bumpy road, and if I lived on that road, I certainly wouldn't want Amazon vans rattling over those bumps at all hours of the night. So that should help in the short term with dealing with some of those concerns. And then beyond that, we're looking at replacing the water line underneath the road too, just because it's something that needs to be done before the road gets paved. So we're hoping that Amazon helps us out a little bit with that as well. And as far as the sidewalk goes, there's a sidewalk on one side of Intervale right now. It's in really tough condition. So the condition would also be to replace that sidewalk. And then we recognize that the bridge crossing where you transition from Intervale to Poplar, it's that 1-lane bridge underneath the railroad track is a tough configuration too. And it's really not something that's ideal for Amazon's operations. So we've asked Amazon to look at assisting us with signalizing that bridge right there to help with some of the traffic flow through there. And one of the other things that Amazon did promise us was that most of their deliveries would happen at night. So they're going to have like 13 large tractor-trailer truck deliveries on a daily basis, and all that would happen after, I think after midnight, between the hours of like midnight and 6 a.m. is what I recall. So those trucks will come in overnight to avoid further congesting those intersections. But that facility itself, it's difficult really to get anywhere in the city because you got to go north, either underneath that 1-lane bridge, or you have to go out onto Bemis right there, and that intersection is tough, and it backs up from the intersection with Summer Street all the way down past Intervale at times during the day. So we recognize it's tough, and we're hoping that 1 year mark, we review the traffic study and make any changes that we need to.
Nick, has there been any talk about creating another road out to Airport Road? Because I've heard talk of that. Has that been discussed at all with Amazon?
It's been discussed, I know, internally. Tom, I'm not sure if you have any more information on that, but the Redevelopment Authority right now owns that the Airport Road sand pit that was historically used by the DPW to mine sand and used as a staging area, and that abuts Crawford Street and also abuts the Simon Saw property. So there's an opportunity there to run a road from the Amazon facility out to Crawford Street, which would be a more appropriate entrance and exit for a commercial facility like that, because Crawford Street is a very industrialized road.
Right, and the Sandpit site's about a 46-acre site between Lunenburg and Fitchburg. It's about split in half between the two, and it's owned by the Redevelopment Authority. We've been working hand in hand with them over the last few years to actually redevelop that parcel. And so we did two things with the Amazon parcel there. So the special permit had a condition placed on it that said in the event that that property was redeveloped, that the property owner would commit to working with us to create that access road. And then the Redevelopment Authority is also aware of this, so any sale that they make of the property, a condition would be placed on the sale that that access road would be made. So we're certainly looking ahead, and that might be more of the 5 to 7 year strategy, and some of these things will be more short term, but there's a few different things we're trying to do there. Great. And downtown, just in brief, I want to run through a few things that are happening. So we've got over $250 million of investment happening in the pipeline. Some of those things are completed investments, some are under construction today, and others are planned in the next few years. I'm just going to run through a few of them. The Harper Furniture development, right in the Moran Square area, is a 44-unit development, mixed income with 8,600 square feet of commercial space. That's currently, the construction's well underway. It's going to be a historic rehab of the old firehouse and the Harper Furniture building and new construction in between. And that project will be completed in late spring, summer of '22. It will be apartments, yes, 44-unit apartments. And it's a mix between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. I want to say there's 4 to 5 3-bedrooms within it. And then the rest are a mix of 1s and 2s. And, you know, given that it's right next to the intermodal station, we really wanted to take advantage of the folks that would be commuting in and out on the train. And I think that's really the target market here. And we're pretty excited about that project. Yes. So 40% of the units are deed restricted affordable. And they kind of run the gamut from anything below 80% of the area median income. And then some of the units are actually specified for folks earning 30% of the area median income. And then others are workforce housing and market rate housing. So it really does run the gamut. We know that we don't have enough quality housing across the board of all income types. So we wanted to create some more housing diversity. Yeah, you're welcome. And just up the street from that, we have the Crescent Street Townhouses, which is a project our department helped lead. This is a much smaller scale than 44 units, but it's a 7-unit townhouse development. And one of the things we're trying to do downtown is encourage a lot of market rate housing right now to create a more mix of incomes. And this is a project that was funded through a state program called HDIP, which provides tax credits to developers building market rate housing downtown. And at the same time, the local government, city council and the mayor were able to negotiate a tax agreement where this was a vacant lot for a long time. I'm sure many of you remember the fire that took place, and it's been vacant since. And so when a property owner like this renovates a vacant lot and builds housing on it, we tax them on the improvements that they make. But what we're able to do with this project is say, well, you know, we want to encourage this kind of development. So the city council and the mayor's office negotiated a tax agreement that basically said for the improvements that were made on the property for a period of time, they'll exempt that additional value from taxes. It's basically a tax break for a developer, because otherwise, and the developer, Nick Pelletier, would tell you himself, without that, this project wouldn't have been possible. So I appreciate the council's help making that happen. Then a couple other projects we have planned but haven't started construction yet. Gateway Apartments, and actually if you can see the cursor, University Apartments right behind it, are owned by the same property owner who originally developed the Harper building. And between the two of them, it's over 250 units of housing. It's going to be, once again, a mix between market rate and affordable. and it was permitted by our planning board, and right now they're working their way through the funding rounds, which I suspect will take a few years to happen, but once it gets up and running, it's going to be another great opportunity to bring more activity and vitality and high-quality housing downtown. Just around the corner at the old BF Brown building and the stables, we've got the Fitchburg Arts Community, which is a 66-unit development by New View Communities, who also redeveloped 470 Main Street, just down the street here. And they're in partnership with the Fitchburg Art Museum, as this, of course, is right across the street. This will be artist preference affordable housing. And this is a historic preservation job. It's going to do, really great things, creating some sort of new housing, but also paying homage to the existing historic construction there. And a lot of folks ask, is anything ever happening there? And I am as impatient as everybody else, but there's been some big unforeseen challenges with that project, chief among them, of course, being the fire. But now we're actually in a really good place with this project, and it's basically just going through the motions right now, waiting for a couple key funding sources, which, I hope we'll hear good news this winter. But if not, it might just take another year to get going, but they're right on track where they need to be. And then across the street from us, where we are today, of course, the Fitchburg Theater Block project. And the university kicked off the first stage with the $3 million Idea Lab, which is a business entrepreneurship space in their video game design lab. Every semester, about 30 students, that is their studio, where they spend their time creating new video games and kind of working with the Business Entrepreneurship Center, taking their ideas to the marketplace. But that's really just the first step in a much broader $75 million project. So the next phase will be renovating the storefronts that are right behind us here. And today, I believe there's about 7 storefronts. They're gonna shrink the footprint a bit, actually. It'll be 2 to 3 storefronts, and then they're gonna take some of the storefronts to the side of the theater and bump out the lobby space and create a more kind of 21st century theater lobby. But that work's going to be starting this year. And then following that, they're going to be adding a black box theater, which is exactly what it sounds like, a large black box that will be beside the existing construction. And that will be essentially a classroom for the students in the fine arts department to do theater and have smaller scale theater events. And then the final stage will be the actual theater itself, a 1,200-seat theater that will not just be an asset for the university, but will be, we hope, a draw for regional events, arts and culture related throughout the city, and really throughout North Central. And then one other, perhaps not as exciting, but everybody's got to park their car somewhere. They're going to be installing a parking deck. So it'll just be a 2-story Main Street entrance and Central Street entrance, so you'll be able to park about 112 cars in that lot. Any questions on?
What's the timeline, Tom, on the theater block?
Timeline on the theater block. So this commercial storefronts will be starting within the next 12 months, and perhaps the black box theater and some of the parking lot work will not follow that long after. And then I think the theater is on probably a 5-year time frame as they're working through the funding rounds. And then just a few sort of parks and walkability projects, and this is really where my world intersects with Commissioner Erickson here. My department, again, we both through our community development block grant program and different grants we apply for, receive funding to do a variety of community projects. And I just wanted to touch on a few that are happening in the city. So in Park Hill, we are in the process of finalizing the Paulack Community Playground, which will be the first playground of its kind in the region that will be a truly inclusive playground where kids of all abilities will have a place to play. This really started from an idea with a few educators in the public school system that realized that there are no playgrounds in the area that provide opportunities for kids of all abilities, and they worked with our office to get the funding through various grants to make that project happen. And that should be open, we hope later this year, maybe more feasibly early next year, but certainly in time for kids to play with in the spring. The Twin City Rail Trail is a project a long time in the works. I believe we're 17 plus years at this point, and that's a 4.5-mile rail trail connecting downtown Leominster with downtown Fitchburg. And the first phase of that project will be done by March of this year, and that phase will basically take the project all the way to the Fitchburg Green property, kind of right behind it at 4th and Middle Street. And phase 2, which is set to begin in spring of 2024, will actually go from the Patch neighborhood, from the park at First and Railroad, basically, taking a pedestrian bridge over the railroad tracks and over the river, ending at the commuter rail station. So, the goal there, it won't just connect downtown Leominster and downtown Fitchburg, but it'll connect folks in the Patch and in Ward 1 with easier access to the commuter rail station, as it's going to end right there. That project's been, developing a 1,000-foot bridge spanning over a railroad track over the river. It's pretty complicated work, and that design process has delayed things a bit, but we're pretty excited about seeing that through. And the last sort of walkability infrastructure project, and I don't know if you're going to touch on the Water Street Bridge at all.
I wasn't planning to, so
Okay.
give as much detail
Great.
as you can.
So the Water Street Bridge, both the large bridge that's the gateway to our downtown, but also the bridge crossing over Laurel Street. Walnut? Yeah, thank you. So it'll be both bridges are part of this project, and it's slated for the start of construction in 2024, ending in 2026, but we're pretty excited about this project because it's going to take what is today kind of an uninspiring gateway to our downtown and turn it into a really aesthetically pleasing corridor that'll have a 12-foot lane for sort of multimodal access. So right now, one of the challenges we often hear in the Water Street Bridge is if folks want to get from downtown to Market Basket, let's say, or vice versa, it can be pretty hard to travel, particularly in the winter time. And this will create some more, and you'll often see folks on the street because there's just not enough space in the sidewalk, so. Yeah. Right.
Will it remain open during construction, or is that going to be just totally?
The plan is for it to remain open, so they'll.
Mass DOT's indicated they're going to leave one lane open at all times. It'll probably be one lane alternating traffic for a while. But.
I mean, it was really just tough with just the other work, just trying to get to the Market Basket in Water Street.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is, and I'll get to in a second, but the main Boulder two-way conversion, I actually think will help improve traffic circulation as well, because we don't necessarily always have to rely on the Water Street Bridge anymore with some of those fixes. Which brings me to my last point. With the main Boulder project, it's currently underway. A lot of what you're seeing in the fall is not about the two-way conversion itself, but it's, as we are doing this work, we also wanted to improve sidewalks, particularly on Boulder Drive, where a lot of our sidewalks were in poor condition. Some of them were just asphalt. Sidewalks, curbing improvements, new crosswalks, wheelchair ramps, and then in addition to that, creating the physical accommodations we actually need to convert main Boulder Drive to two-way traffic, which is, basically at the western intersection where Main and Boulder meet. There'll be some new geometric configurations to allow for the two-way conversion, and the same will go at the Water Street Bridge. So just east of the bridge, we'll be making, and actually you can see the configurations today. Coming off the bridge, you'll actually be able to take a right if you want to go westbound and head right on Boulder Drive for any bypass traffic. So we know about 40% of the traffic going through Main Street is bypass. So we wanted to give folks a way to, if you're going to pick up your kid from daycare, or you're going to the grocery store, you're not going to stop anywhere else along the way. And we wanted to give folks a bypass option. And then at the same time, encourage more kind of walkability on Main Street, slowing down traffic a bit. The other two changes are really the traffic signals on Putnam in Maine, and Putnam and Boulder, that will allow for that accommodation to really take place. So we'll be seeing that finalized in June at the very latest of this year. So the work's really, they're going to do all the work they can this fall and then wrap it up in the spring. Did you have anything to add there?
Just one other important upgrade was some improvements to the drainage system on Boulder Drive, and specifically behind Tacos Tequila and over on at the intersection with Putnam Street. And during really intense rainstorms, we had drain manhole covers blow off at both of those locations. We had flooding impacts to the owner of the Putnam Street Lanes building. And it seems that the drainage work that PJ Alberts completed to date has addressed those issues. So you don't see it because it's underground, but it's a good thing that the work was done.
Great. I'm glad I asked. I love sidewalks. He loves drainage. So I forget about those things sometimes. But the other thing we'll be doing is closing down Cushing Street. And between Cushing and Mill, we'll be creating, kind of building off of the Mill Street work today, creating more of a pedestrian plaza. And part of that is just to create a more pedestrian-friendly area. But we also had to close down Cushing Street with this project because, first of all, there's not really a need anymore. You're able to go northbound in a variety of different ways once this project's done, but it's also unsafe. It's unsafe today. It'll be even more unsafe when the two-way conversion's complete. The sight lines are bad. You know, you get folks going up Cushing and trying to hop across to Blossom Street, and those intersections aren't quite lined up. It's just generally unsafe all around. So I think that about covers it in terms of the main Boulder project. Oh, one other thing, as part of it, we're going to be removing the parking meters on Main Street and instituting time-limited free parking. So it'll, you know, if it's 2 hours today, it'll be 2 hours free parking. If it's an hour, it'll be an hour free parking. And then we'll also be opening up the Mill Street garage, the Boulder Drive entrance to public parking. Today, it's only for permit holders. So we're losing a little bit of parking on Boulder Drive through this project, but we're actually going to be adding a lot more as a net increase between those two changes, and hopefully just making it easier for folks to park downtown as well. And I think that about covers it with that project, but happy to take any questions on anything else. Putnam will be converted to two-way once again. Right, and so to tie it back to the Water Street conversation, we no longer have to rely on that being the sole way in and out of downtown, which you can imagine if we didn't do this work, it's going to be disruptive, right, to when the Water Street Bridge closes, but hopefully it'll be a little bit less so. And, you know, we've got, you all more than anyone know how disruptive sewer separation work can be. And we're about to do similar work on Main Street. So that's another great benefit is when that work's happening, we'll still have Boulder Drive open, so you can go east and west. We don't have to have a complete gridlock downtown. So it's great long-term, but in the short term, it's going to give us a lot of flexibility with some big construction projects coming through.
Why did it change back from the 1 and 2 back to 1? Because the best thing they ever did, you could just, instead of going down, you know, Water Street, you go just bypass all that and go down Main Street.
Do you have a...
It makes sense to make it back a one-way.
That's a great question. I don't know, to be honest, why it was switched back. I really don't.
They made it one-way Main Street, that's when they did it.
Right.
It
It,
makes no sense to just keep it 2 ways.
I'm wondering if maybe police department had something to do with that. I know they kind of prefer that configuration, but
Well, I think part of it, until we make some parking changes to make it a little bit easier to park, there's always a sense that we don't have enough parking downtown. And the one, aside from the traffic aspect, the one thing the one-way change allowed for was some additional parking on Putnam, specifically for the Putnam lanes. And I have a feeling that might have played a role. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. It predated both Nick and myself, the decision, but it's a good question.
No, I have a question. The vans, they have to drop off, so you have to be level. And you're changing, you know, the way people drive. And the vans can still be able to use a level parking area.
In terms, oh, absolutely.
Even have them on buses.
Mm-hmm.
As long as that was taken into consideration.
yeah, I mean, everything out there is designed to be fully accessible. There really shouldn't be any issue there.
It would probably more accessible than it is today, especially on Boulder Drive.
Right.
I was wondering,
Now, where specifically have you had experience getting dropped off and all that? I mean, just so we can make sure.
Very hard, because you have to find level ground.
Yeah.
If the roof's not level, they don't go down.
So there should be many more areas to do that, to be honest.
That was gonna be another question.
And so you'll see a lot, we have wheelchair ramp enhancements throughout Maine and Boulder. A lot of the sidewalk work on Boulder is taking place on Boulder because it's a bit simpler, to be honest. With Main Street, one of the challenges is we have vaults underneath the ground, so you're not just ripping up the existing sidewalk, replacing it. You're dealing with some of these vaults, which is a big unknown and can get pretty complicated. So we'll be taking that on in a subsequent phase, but unfortunately weren't able to do so today in this first round of the work. So I think you'll see much more enhancements on Boulder Drive, on Main Street, some here and there. I know another area we focused on, or will be focusing on, is Newton Place by the library. So I think you'll see improvements. We're not probably quite where we want to be yet, but we're working towards it.
Tom, could you talk about the tree planting program? Because Ward 1 is in the middle of where a lot of trees can be planted, from what I understand.
38 slides here, Councilor Schultz, and I didn't even talk about the program that's happening in Ward 1. That was a misstep. So we've got a program called Greening the Gateways through DCR that just started last spring. And basically what that program is going to do is for areas in Ward 1 and in the downtown, they're going to be planting up to 2,400 street trees within the neighborhood. 80% of those trees will be on private property, and the bulk of those will be in individual homes, as opposed to just public property. So what the project does is we actually get a team of foresters whose job it is to really look at a site and figure out what the right tree for the right location is. And they work with property owners to get a tree planted. If you're a homeowner, what you need to do is basically just sign a watering agreement that says you'll water the trees for a 2-year period. But the trees are free, and the trees are free and curated by a specialist in the field who knows what goes where. So on the public end, we're certainly looking at projects like Maine Boulder, like the Summer Street Sidewalk Project, looking for opportunities to add more street trees to the downtown. But I'd certainly encourage anyone in attendance today and anyone listening to go to the state's website. And Commissioner Erickson's given his presentation. I'll find the URL and I'll put it up here in just a few minutes. But it shows both where the planting areas are, which is, again, the bulk of Ward 1, if not all of it. And then it also gives you the contact information on who to contact if you'd like a tree planted on your property. Thank you for catching that. That's a good one. And then just one last quick thing, the American Rescue Plan Act. So Fitchburg has a really exciting opportunity where we've got about $31.2 million in local aid that's coming to us from the federal government. This was from one of the most recent coronavirus response bills. And just a few of the guardrails, it needs to be spent by the end of 2026. And the city, right now we're working on releasing the first budget by early of 2022. Some of the objectives of the ARPA program is to support urgent COVID-19 response efforts, first and foremost, because that's, was the impetus for this in the first place. It's going to replace lost revenue for municipalities. The city, in our case, we lost a lot of revenue when Great Wolf Lodge had to close down for a period of time. That's a pretty significant hotels tax, almost $1 million a year. But it also is going to be providing economic stabilization, and a big emphasis of the program is to address systemic public health and economic challenges. So we're going to be able to use this to support COVID-19 response, but then also economic and community development efforts that will help us, for lack of a better term, build back better. So the goal is not just COVID response, but it's to get us somewhere where we aren't today, to help us propel even further ahead. So we put out a request for proposal for the community, for different nonprofit groups in particular and other public agencies to submit projects for funding. And then, of course, Department of Public Works, Community Development and Planning, and other offices in the city will be submitting proposals as well. If you know anyone or organizations that might be eligible, I'd encourage you to let them know by November 15th. These proposals are going to be due. And you can find more information on the proposals and really everything at fitchburgma.gov/ARPA. So looking ahead, just a few quick things here. The Community Development Block Grant Program, we have every year, we fund different community projects throughout the city. The applications open in November. If you're interested in learning more, we'll be sending information on Facebook and our community newsletter about that process. Again, that first budget for ARPA will be coming out winter of '22. And this one is kind of important for Ward 1. We have an urban renewal authority known as the Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority. They're based at 166 Boulder Drive, the old GE facility. Every 20 years, they create an urban renewal plan, which calls out particular properties that are distressed and often have absentee landlords that might not really play a big role in seeing their properties redeveloped. And what they can do is, by putting these properties on a map, they can engage in urban renewal efforts to redevelop those properties to bring them up to productive reuse. Their last plan 20 years ago had much of North Street on the urban renewal plan. And I think anyone who's seen North Street today versus what it was 20, 25 years ago, the work that they did had a dramatic impact on that corridor. The next round of the Redevelopment Authority's work, they're going to be targeting parcels on Main Street as well as the Water Street corridor. Not residential properties, but the commercial properties on Water Street. I'm sure if you've driven up and down that corridor, you probably got a few ideas in your mind of what some of those properties might be that have sat vacant for years and haven't had any investment take place in them. So they'll be putting out a new urban renewal plan in late '21 to early 2022, and it'll actually go through the City Council. So I'm sure Councilor Schultz will make you aware when it's working its way through the public process, but that will be a good opportunity to see what the Redevelopment Authority is up to, and in particular, some, I think, really important and impactful improvements in Ward 1.
That's great news for Water Street. Great news.
Amazing news for Water Street. So looking forward to seeing those plans soon. And then just a few of the things I talked about before. The rail trail phase 1 will be done in March. Phase 2 will have a design public hearing. At least last I heard was in spring of 2022. And then the Water Street Bridge, there'll be a design public hearing. And in both of these cases where the design team, MassDOT, the city will be present to answer any questions folks might have. And I believe that's in 2022 for the Water Street Bridge, but I haven't gotten confirmation yet.
I haven't gotten anything yet either, but I get the feeling it's probably a few months out at least.
Right. So those are just a few Ward 1 things that came to mind, but happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes.
I have a question in reference to the Twin City Rail Trail.
Yes.
I walked it the other day, moved up and on to Water Street. Pressed the button, walked across the street. First time I stopped, and I went across. As soon as I got across, the light was still blinking. If someone was coming from the Water Street area, heading towards Duckmill, cars wouldn't be able to see. Are they gonna go back to yellow and red lights to make the cars stop completely? Is that feasibility?
So
In other words, if someone was coming on the Water Street side, going heading towards Duckmill,
yeah.
if they saw the light blinking, then they could go across, they would go across. But people coming off the Water Street, going down East Road on the right, they don't know to stop.
So is there no
The first car stopped for me. I went across. As soon as I got across, the second car took the right down Venus Road, even though the light was still blinking.
So there is a flashing beacon on facing that direction, but the car just failed to acknowledge it and just kept going right through it.
So in other words, I think the safest thing would be if you go back and red yellow lights. I don't know if that's a feasibility.
So
Because I walked across, I do a lot of walking from Lucerne Road down to Summer Street area.
Mhm.
A lot of times I'll press the button, walk across the street, have to stop
So I,
Well, they replaced the signage, this was a smaller sign, now there's a bigger sign.
so those types of devices, they're called retroactive.
Rectangular rapid
Rectangular
flashing
rapid flashing
beacons.
beacons, RRFBs, that is the acronym that everyone uses. And so those are a solution that's designed for a crossing that's not at a signalized intersection. So if we were to go to, like what you're talking, like a red light to stop traffic in all directions, we need to install an actual signal at that intersection. And in order to install a signal like that, it's very difficult to convince DOT to go against. They've got a set of criteria for installing a signal like that. It's designed to halt vehicular traffic, and they don't have a warrant for just a pedestrian crossing like that. So that's kind of the next best option besides introducing a fully signalized intersection at that location.
And the other thing, people coming up Enos Road, we have a green arrow, it changes to red, then it goes right to green. People keep coming down, even though people coming down Woodstock have a green light.
So that's water at Winoostock, right?
They need to either put a blinking yellow light for them to halt.
So in that case, so the one other important caveat to all the residents of Ward 1 and throughout the city for that matter is technically speaking, the Twin City Rail Trail Phase 1 is not open yet, which means that it is possible that all of the necessary changes that are need to be made for pedestrian safety haven't been made yet. I know at that light there's supposed to be, I believe, a new pedestrian actuated signal. So there should be, a button where the pedestrian presses it and, it allows for safe passage. And right.
So I just want to clarify, so if you're coming down Winoostock at that intersection trying to go across onto Bemis, and someone's coming up Bemis, taking that left onto Water, so the issue there is that they get a green arrow and they're allowed to take their left, and then that green arrow goes away and it just becomes a green light. So right. They're supposed to, by traffic law, you're supposed to stop and yield to the cars that are coming directly across. So what we did recently as an experiment, for lack of a better term, was we added a 2-second delay between when that green light goes away, the green arrow goes away, and the green light coming on across the way there. And it seems like people are just discourteous drivers and they try to go. So we can try to extend it. I think what you're going to end up seeing there is that people are just going to keep making that left until you have someone come across the intersection to force them to stop. So we have to look at, like you said, either a red arrow there maybe, or a flashing yellow. But that was the first step. We just got a complaint about that a month or so ago, and we had our streetlight contractor add that delay to hopefully help solve it, but it sounds like it hasn't.
Is there a pedestrian leading signal there today?
I don't believe so.
Around the corner, the two cars almost collided. And when I was on Water Street heading down from there, I got a green light, people coming up Enos Road still came up, ran the red light, guy next to me didn't have to stop because I had an SUV, and she was just coming behind me on the right lane. She nailed the van, flipped it over, and up Woodstock Road and slid.
Wow.
When you're coming up Bemis, you don't get a red when the green activates for the Winoostock approach. It goes from a green arrow to just a solid green. So maybe the idea would be to halt all left.
Green arrow, red real quick, then back to green arrow, green light.
Okay, well, I'll look into it.
Great.
Definitely.
Thank you for the feedback. And again, in terms of some of the signage enhancements, I think there's supposed to be a pedestrian leading signal that they're going to install. So when a pedestrian from the rail trail presses the button to cross, there should be a pedestrian only crossing time. And if there isn't today, that's one of the enhancements. I imagine that will be one of the last things to take place in the spring as they're finalizing everything. But I appreciate the feedback. All right. Any other questions?
Any other questions for Tom?
And I'll be here after the meeting if anyone has additional questions. And if you are, I guess, listening in the audience, you'd like to learn more, you can head to fitchburgma.gov and head to the community development page. My email's there. It's probably easier for you to just see it on the website than for me to spell it to you, given my last name. But you feel free to reach out if you have any particular questions, comments, concerns. We can also add you to our newsletter, which stays updated with monthly updates with some of the projects I've talked about today and other ones coming down the pipeline. I'm always happy to help and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I guess it's Nick Erickson's turn. Nick, DPW Commissioner, he's ready to present, and he doesn't have a PowerPoint for you, but he'll present, and then he'll answer any questions for you.
Yeah, no PowerPoint, but I like the feedback on hearing these issues. That's kind of what I wanted to do tonight. So I see a few familiar faces from the last Ward 1 meeting, but I want to just give a brief background on what the DPW does, what we're responsible for. So we're made up of a few different divisions: water, wastewater, engineering, streets division, parks, cemeteries, and recreation. So the water division obviously takes care of the water supply, treatment, and distribution. They own, I think it's 16 dams that they're all responsible for. Each of those dams requires an inspection conducted on a frequency based on its size and its hazard rating. The wastewater division is responsible for wastewater collection and treatment, and ultimately they discharge that treated wastewater to the Nashua River. So there's a lot of EPA permitting and compliance that they have to keep up on. Right now they're going through a handful of combined sewer separation projects. They completed one a few years ago in the Beach Street and Hazel Street area. This year they're working on one centered around the Clarendon Street and Water Street neighborhoods. So obviously we're all lucky to deal with the Water Street closure a couple of months ago, about a month ago. So that was necessitated by that combined sewer separation work. They were down 20 feet with an excavation on Water Street, so ultimately the safest way to handle that work was to close the road for a period of time. We're glad it's back open. We aren't exactly too happy with the paving restoration out on Water Street, so we may have the contractor come back and address that after it's had a few months to settle and smooth things out a little bit over there. The engineering division, we handle all the permitting, street lights, traffic lights, surveying, inspections, and then we manage the city's Chapter 90 program. Chapter 90 is the money that we get from the state to repave roads, fix sidewalks, fix drainage, stuff like that. We get about $1.2 million annually, and that essentially makes up our entire paving budget. So this year we paved Summer Street, Oak Hill Road, and we're in the process of paving Alpine Road, McIntyre Road, and a portion of Williams Road, which is three neighborhoods up in the northern part of the city, north of Main Street. We also have the Streets Division, which is responsible for the daily operation and maintenance of the city's roadway infrastructure, storm drainage, bridges, signs, striping, all that good stuff, pothole filling, that's a big one. So on any given day, we have one crew out filling potholes somewhere in the city. One guy that is responsible for all the line striping and sign replacements. So he's been pretty active the past few weeks, repainting a lot of the center lines and crosswalks throughout the city. Then we've got other folks that work on rebuilding catch basins or cleaning up trash in certain areas, cleaning up mattresses that get dumped on the side of the road, responding to any of those complaints that we get on a daily basis. Then we've got our Parks Division. Unfortunately, our Parks Division is comprised of 3 individuals or 3 positions, one of which is currently filled by someone who's out on workers' comp, but those 3 people are responsible to maintain all of the city's 41 parks. So if you ever see a park that's in need of mowing or brush trimming or something like that, it's not because we just aren't good at our jobs, it's because we're understaffed and we're trying to put out fires elsewhere in the city. So a lot of times it's helpful to just get complaints from people because then we know where we need to send guys on a daily basis. And then we have our cemeteries division. The city has 8 cemeteries, the largest of which is Forest Hill, which is the cemetery that's right at the intersection of Rollstone and Electric. That's our only remaining cemetery that has vacancies, and we're running out of space there quickly. I believe there's about 200 open graves available, which is about another year's or two worth of burials. So we're actively looking at ways to expand the cemetery. But unfortunately, there's not very many good parcels that are owned by the city to expand a cemetery yet. So we're working through some challenges there right now. Then we've got our rec division, who's responsible for all the city pool, a few splash parks that we have, and then all the recreational leagues. So, you know, baseball, t-ball, football, all that stuff, basketball. So that's a little snapshot as to how DPW is kind of split up and how we manage our daily operations. But really, I think the reason why you're all here is you have things you want to talk about, what you see out on the roadways in front of your properties in your neighborhoods. And I'm happy to hear those issues, and hopefully we can start looking into some of these things for you. So.
I have a question. When you replace the sign at the end of the street, are you not responsible for digging out the old one? Our street has, when the old sign just fell down, the city put in a new one, and there's still, metal.
Still like a metal post in the ground? They should pull out the old post before putting in the new one.
Like 4 or 5 years ago.
What street are you on?
William Street.
William Street?
Yes, the corner of William and Walton. I mean, they're just, obviously it just fell, it broke, but there's still metal. And then, and when they did replace it, they didn't make any attempt to put, the grass back, anything. And I know it's not you, but I know it's Unitil. Unitil has totally destroyed the sidewalks in our neighborhood. Our whole sidewalk is sinking when they took the holes out in the spring. Ours was actually cement sidewalk, and they left the hole was all sand. Our whole sidewalk.
This is William Street? So something like that. So they pull road opening permits to be able to go in and do this, and as a condition of the road opening permit, they're supposed to restore their work to equal or better than condition.
I've talked to Amy Green, I've talked to Joshua. I mean, they started pulling out putting the second telephone poles in last October, November. And then they left the other poles there, and then they removed them in March and April of this year, and they're just all up and down Walton, they're all.
And they just haven't come back to put new panels in or anything like that?
And what Amy Green had told me is that Unitil said they were trying to come up with a definition of what was a reasonable time frame. And we're going into winter now, and our whole sidewalk, it's this deep. Somebody's gonna break next.
Unitil is particularly difficult to deal with on occasion. A lot of times they'll go through a construction season and wait to do all that restoration stuff in the 11th hour right before winter.
When they took down all the trees, they just left craters everywhere. You guys have been finding, your Parks and Rec guys, when they finally cleaned up Howard Park, they were there last week. They left craters in the park when they cut down trees.
Which park was that?
Howard Park on
It's on Walton Street.
I mean, they left craters. They
Yeah.
left craters in our yard, and I know it was one of the first meetings where we had this, I think it may have been your predecessor saying, what is their obligation to fix it? And they're like, yeah, right. And then
Well, the sidewalks, they most certainly should restore.
yeah,
So I'll reach out to them about that.
sidewalks have not been restored from Walton Street, Charles Street, all the way up to probably halfway up the street, and I don't know if there's further ones done, and then they did a few on where the approved condos, and we have a cement sidewalk in it. And there is, it's just,
It's big holes. So
it's a big hole, and they took out the telephone pole, and it's just been sitting there since March.
and it's concrete, not asphalt sidewalks.
That was because I think the builder was required to do,
Yeah.
but it's a mess.
All right. Well, I'll I'll certainly look into those issues. Between the signposts, that's easy enough to have our guys do. You know,
Is there any reason why there, some intersections don't even have stop signs? If the top of like Ellis and Walton, there's no stop sign.
so stop signs are an ordinance-driven sign. So if there should be a stop sign at a given intersection, it should be listed in the city's ordinance. So we can search through that to see if there should be a stop sign there. If it is listed, then it should have one.
You know, that's a walking route where all the kids go up to, and they don't stop. I mean, they know that's not really, but I think it's stop, some of the stop signs will help some of those intersections.
So if there's no stop sign there right now and it's not in the ordinance, the best way to go about getting a stop sign is to have Bernie assist or Councilor Schultz assist with putting together a petition. That'll go to the police department and me to take a look at. And usually the police department will make the final ruling and say, yes, we can put a stop sign here, or no, we can't, because they have
Ellis
all the
Street.
traffic
You're
data.
talking about Ellis Street, Evelyn, right? Yeah. Ellis and Walton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, the kids are always walking up to school.
So then once that petition goes through city council, assuming it gets approved, then DPW would install the stop sign and it would get added to the ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
You guys did do a great job on cleaning up Howard Park, by the way.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Was that the one that had the, it was a railing that was in rough shape and looked like it was kind of dangerous too?
By the basketball court.
By the
Yeah.
basketball
Yeah,
court.
kids, when they put the railing in, the kids like destroyed it within a week.
Okay. Any other complaints? Issues? Okay. Oh, you got pictures, good. That always helps. Yeah. And I talked to the sewer system manager about the reflectors on the hydrants. So he has a construction progress meeting at the end of this week with the contractor, Jay Polito, and he's going to address those with the contractor this week. So it'll probably be something that doesn't get taken care of for a few weeks, but it's still on our radar, it's still on our list of things to do. Four, so I had four on my list from last meeting. It was 2 on Water Street, 1 on South Street, 1 on Middle Street, and 2 on First Street. 5, I guess. 6.
It's not on red, it's on water, across First, and then the one on the opposite side of the bridge, where the sort of stuff right there.
Those are the 2 on Water, right? Okay. And then I had 1 on South Street,
Yeah, that's another one.
yeah, 1 on Middle Street, and then 2 on First Street. Okay. Any others? Okay. Perfect. So those are definitely still on our radar. Yeah, the contractor accessed the hydrants to either, drain the water main or, chlorinate or pressure test. And I think as part of that, they took them off and never put them back on. So we'll get them back on there. Familiar face. It was an issue, and we said we'd take care of it. So we're still working on it. Same with the streetlights. I think.
Actually, the street light that I was complaining about came on at 2:52 one morning, and my neighbor's camera caught it,
Huh.
which was hilarious, because it was out for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden it was on.
It's on and now it's working again?
Yeah, it's on, it's lighting up the road, and then did someone put one on a pole on Ash Street? Because now there's a light on Ash Street.
Yeah, we had Unitil, so they replaced that pole and never put our street light back on the pole, which they're supposed to do. So after you complained, I called them and they put the light back on the pole for us. Yeah. So both lights are okay now. Perfect.
Nick, could you talk about private streets versus public streets? We got a individual here that lives on one of those private streets, and it's Greenhurst Avenue. It's been
Yes, so Greenhurst Ave is a private paper, well, It's a paper road, but because a street has actually been constructed on it, it's technically classified as a private way. And in that case, the city code has a process by which work can be conducted on a private way, but the city is lawfully obligated to not conduct any work on private property, including private ways. So if we do anything out there, technically it's against the law. That being said, we do try to make accommodations to address some of those issues. Like we've got a tree removal scheduled for on Greenhurst Ave. It's in our contractor's queue, and we're looking to take that down. We were out there towards the end of the road to do some regrading. There was an issue with just some old fill that had, turned rocky and caused some issues with a resident out there. Yeah, sounds like you're familiar. So we had them come in and regrade that with, bring in some new crushed asphalt millings. So we got that squared away. We did some research to identify any petitions that have been submitted for that road in the past, and we did find one from about 10 years ago or so. The water department was supposed to pave the road after they did some water work out there. Obviously, that never happened, but we were going to use that petition as a means to pave the road. We talked to the gas company ahead of doing that work. So the gas company is going to be doing gas main replacement in that street beginning next spring. So there and out on the main road on Moonusnock. So
I was told that the developer didn't make the street wide enough.
So
Back in the 30s, they didn't have developers.
right, and there's a few. So in order for a road to be accepted by the city, it needs to meet the city's standards. So width is one of those issues, but it also needs to have clearly defined survey bounds, laying out the actual boundaries of the road, and then there needs to be a legal description that accompanies that. Until those bounds are set and a legal description is made and a professional land surveyor has stamped that that's appropriate and consistent with the Registry of Deeds requirements, the city cannot accept that type of road. So it's not an uncommon problem. The city of Worcester is dealing with this same exact issue, and they've begun the process to start accepting some of these roads. But in order for that to happen, essentially we need to go through and at a bare minimum hire a surveyor to install bounds, put together a plan of land, put together a legal description and all that. So it's quite the undertaking. We don't have a professional surveyor on staff. So it would be something we'd have to subcontract out, and it does become costly. So for Greenhurst and a lot of these other private roads, though, so Chapter 157 of the city's city code lays out a whole process by which you can petition to have work done on a private way. So I've got copies of that right here, summarized in just a one-pager. So the first step is, so I'll just read through it. I guess it'll be the easiest way to do it. So petition required procedure. Petition signed by at least 3/4 of the abutters on a private way within the city of Fitchburg requesting that temporary repairs be made to said way shall first be presented to the city council and shall be forwarded by it to its committee on public works. So essentially 3/4 of the residents on that private way need to sign on and submit a petition to city council. City council passes it on to the public works committee.
People that lived on the street petitioned.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, they came down and paid, I think they even paid it twice. It's 1950.
Right, and so any time that work's requested, you still have to follow that process. Just because one petition has been completed, it's difficult for us to find the resources to fix public ways, let alone roads that the city doesn't even own or have a responsibility to maintain. So I think your best chance of having work done on a road like that, a private road, is to follow this process to a T. And then assuming that happens and all the people that are basically inserted into this process to perform the checks and balances to spending public money on a private property, if they all agree that it needs to be done, then it can be done. So that involves city council, who refers to their committee on public works. And then it also involves the Commissioner of Public Works, and it also involves the Planning Board, I believe, according to this document. So essentially, each of those bodies needs to approve this, and then it goes finally back to City Council for a final vote by the council. If City Council votes favorably, then it becomes a successful petition, and DPW can follow through with the work, assuming that there's funds to do so. So, like I said, in this case, there was a petition submitted several years ago for the water department to repave that roads. That's what we were going to use as an effort to take care of that issue, especially at the end where it's not paved. But the gas company is going to be out there next spring. We'd hate to, spend $15,000 repaving it and then have to rip it up. So it's still on the radar. I think it's just going to be delayed a little bit. We may be able to ask Unitil very nicely to maybe help contribute some money towards paving too. Still some puddles. Yeah. So the way that I think it's Mass General Law is written is that the city can conduct pothole filling and trash pickup and all that on private roads, but they can't make any permanent repairs. And they define permanent repairs as any drainage work or any substantial road reconstruction or paving. So we can go in, we can patch our little potholes, but if we install catch basins and all that stuff, then it's technically violating the Mass General Law, unless we go through this process that's laid out in the city code. So I haven't been through this process myself. I'd love to use Greenhurst Ave as an experiment. So if you can get your 3/4 of your neighbors to get together and work with Councillor Schultz, then maybe we can.
Yeah. So
just get.
I think by my math, that's 3. I think you need 3 of them.
3 of them, yeah.
Not a math major, but.
And so one of the other issues on Greenhurst that Councillor Schultz made me aware of was the speed bump right at the transition between Winoosknock and Greenhurst. So I actually talked to our superintendent of streets, who I think was involved when that was paved way back a number of years ago. So according to him, that little berm or speed bump, for lack of a better term, is what keeps the water on Winoosknock heading downhill. If we were to remove that and flatten it out, a lot of that water would and it would. So maybe we can work on potentially addressing some of the drainage at Winoosknock, and that may help with the problem. Okay.
Maybe it'll take the speed bump. Maybe it'll take the speed bump away at some point if you improve the drainage. Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you get that from City Hall?
So Councillor Schultz can help you with putting the petition together. He's familiar with the process, and once that's done and submitted to City Council, then Councillor Schultz can help you with putting that together. The petition itself, is it an actual form, or is it just a letter drafted to you, and then you can put the form together for them?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll give you a copy of this to take home with you tonight, but after the meeting, I'll hand these out.
Any other questions for Nick? We haven't heard from everyone tonight, but
At Kimball and Franklin Street, probably going to put in a new pole. Now, the signs that say 2A, 12, 30 mile speed limit in an arrow, are now behind the pole.
Oh,
So if someone coming across Kimball Street, they're not sure whether they should go up the hill on Franklin Street or keep to the left, like that. So in the train sign is also sitting underneath the railing that's been there for a year or two.
okay.
And that needs to be, so if you could put the signs on the pole so that
Okay.
It's not totally blocked. And then
Should be-
on Charles and Roadstone and Laurel and Roadstone, okay, is that big triangular area of land that the city owns. If you go to the top, it's hard to see what's coming, well, either up Roadstone if you're looking from Laurel and Roadstone.
Mhm.
In Charles, look, try to look, see what's coming down. The grass and some shrubbery is so high now because it's grown wild. If you can cut that back like a 45-degree angle and cut out some of that thing so people, when they come up, they can see what's coming.
Mhm.
Because right now the grass is so high and there's wild shrubbery that's growing like that. You get that cut back, cut down, cut back.
Yeah, we can certainly cut it back. Brush overgrowth, obviously, it's something that we have to deal with on an annual basis, but for a little wedge-shaped piece of land like that, that isn't necessarily being occupied by anything, maybe we can look at, resurfacing it with some stone or something too.
They cut a lot of brush that was overhanging the wall in the Wells Street playground.
Mhm.
And even the Roseland Street playground along the fence, they cut a lot of that brush. And that's not blocking any view of traffic or anything. This is, well, safety issue
Right,
that I'm asking for.
okay. Well, we can certainly take care of that easy enough.
And in that area, it's just worth noting, I guess, one of the other things my department does is help to support the sale of city-owned property that's no longer of use to the city. Some of that property gets auctioned off. Actually, I think there's an auction this Thursday, and that's headed up by our city treasurer. But in other special sites, we will put out a request for proposal and, basically take in different proposals and then ultimately select the one that's the best fit for the neighborhood and the city, et cetera. So just in that general area, the Laurel Street School, and then on the other side of Ward 1, the Wanusinok School, it used to be the Flack campus at 44 Wanusinok, are two that we'll be selling in the next year, which, hopefully with the goal of getting those properties back up on the tax roll. And, it's not quite the question you're asking, but I feel like Nick's like Santa Claus here. He comes in with his sack full of gifts. You can plug your potholes. You can, make your private streets public. I don't have much to offer, so I'm trying to at least answer your question in some other way. But there's a couple of those projects coming down the pipeline that hopefully bringing some of those properties up to productive reuse will be helpful.
There was one more in West Fitchburg, just before the split between 12 and 2A, near Fairbanks. There's a big green sun, but the trees are now overgrown, and it's like blocking the sun, so if you were traveling along, you don't know whether you should go up 12 or cut on the left on 2A.
I think I know, so is that if you're headed out of town? Right on the right before the split?
Away from town.
Yeah.
That whether you're going to go up the hill, continue 12, or take left on 2A and go towards the Mullen campus.
Yeah. All right. This time of year is particularly challenging for all the vegetation clearing, because, we've got a pretty large city, a lot of roads, and we try to stay on top of it the best we can, but unless we get reports of specific issues like this, it's tough for us to just, we're spending so much time out there taking care of the requests, it's tough to just spend the time driving around and looking and identifying these areas. So thank you for the reports, and I'll work with Superintendent of Streets to add these to the list of brush clearing areas. Sure.
Someone recently, I don't know how long it's been, maybe a week, there's at least a dozen bags of trash that were dumped on Laurel Street between Charles and Rose. Just a little up from that building.
Yeah, it's near that building.
That's school department building.
Is it like actual trash bags just full of?
Close to black, there's a big chunk of cardboard
Since we're talking about dumping, nobody's asked, but we often hear complaints about the rail trail and dumping that's taken place along it. If you've used it, although no one's supposed to, I know a lot of people use the rail trail. Just so everyone knows, the city is not allowed to actually access the property today until the rail trail is completed in March. So we see everything you see. Technically, it's under the jurisdiction of the contractor right now, and they see it as a liability to bring anyone else on site to clean it. So just know we're aware of the issue, and we'll work to rectify it once we are given the go-ahead in spring. And it's unfortunate we can't go there sooner.
Any other questions before we conclude tonight's meeting? If we're all set, Tom's got a card for you on the tree planting program.
Right, so maurbancanopy.org if you are interested in learning more about the Greening the Gateways program. I also have a card for everyone that's here, and I wrote it on the back in case you'd like to access it and you'd like a tree planted in your yard, or you might know a neighbor or somebody who might be interested. It lets you know if your property's within the zone and then who to contact if it is.
So a big thank you to Tom and Nick for coming out on this rainy, cold Monday night. And I just want to let everybody know that the next Ward 1 meeting will be on Monday, November 22nd, right here in the Legislative Building, also at 6:30 p.m. So thank you all for... What's that? I've already invited the city auditor, Calvin Brooks, to come and explain what he does for the city. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, everybody.